Welcome to Stoughton Media Access Corporation's Community Forum Show. My name is Steve Kelly. I'll be your host today. And today I have the pleasure to bring to you Stephanie Patton from Oasis here in Stoughton, and Larissa Swenson, who is from a whole bunch of confusing acronyms that relate to not wanting kids to smoke. So with that as an introduction, let me start with you, Larissa.
Okay.
Tell us about the effort now to put a 21-year-old purchase program together here in Stoughton, here in the state, in the greater Boston community, and clarify for the audience, if you would, the organization that you work for.
Right. Well, the organization that I work for is Bay State Community Services, and that's located in Quincy. And I am the program coordinator for what's called the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership.
Okay, so to the audience, now you know how I couldn't do that.
Yes, it's a long.
Say again,
the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership.
Okay, that thing.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us, what do you do in the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free thing?
So the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership, it is a program that is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and we aim to eliminate the disparities, the economic and health disparities related to tobacco use and smoking. So we do talk about secondhand smoke with adults and children, how it affects them. We do touch on smoke-free housing. We touch on quitting smoking and providing those resources to everybody in the Commonwealth. And then we also talk about prevention of youth initiation, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, too.
So tell us some of the impacts of, you listed 4 things there that you focus on.
Right.
But what is the impact of sort of, let's start with in-house smoke or secondhand smoke? What's the big deal?
Well, we really know at this point, especially with the Surgeon General, that there's really no safe level of secondhand smoke. So what we do as a group, the Community Partnership and the Tobacco Cessation and Prevention Program up at the Department of Public Health, what they do is we try to approach a lot of municipal housing associations. We approach also a lot of private apartment complexes, and we talk to them about how they can go smoke-free, because there's no safe level of secondhand smoke at all. It does creep through the vents, it creeps through the walls, it creeps through the doors. So we try to get them to go smoke-free, not just to benefit the inhabitants themselves of these municipal housing authorities and these apartment complexes, but it also benefits a lot of these properties as well, because not only is it going to help the residents get healthy and smoke-free, but it's also going to help a lot of these residences and these smoke-free housing complexes turn over a lot of the units that they have. So it helps economically as well as on the health side at the same time.
So Larissa, you were brought in by Stephanie. So
Yes.
Stephanie Patton,
Yeah.
right, who is the coordinator for Oasis, which
Yes.
is organizing Stoughton against substance.
Close, yes. So close. Organizing against substances in Stoughton.
Substances in Stoughton.
Yep.
And you, a great deal of your effort is worked on sort of drug side, alcohol side.
Yep.
But this is an equally threatening, if not equally threatening, but almost because it's a gateway situation. So talk to us about that.
Sure.
Here in Stoughton and what you do.
Yep. So we think about, we like to refer to it as alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. So I put tobacco and alcohol in the same category as all drugs that people might use recreationally. So in the same vein as we think about cocaine and heroin and opiates, tobacco falls in there as well. So the coalition is actually very concerned about tobacco. We haven't been doing a lot of work on it because the town of Stoughton actually, our rates for youth smoking rates are good, which is, we would like to keep them that way, of course.
What does it mean, a good rate?
Well, we're doing better than the state. So I can tell you at the high school, for example, it's something like 7% of kids report, you know what, I can check my note and I can tell you exactly. Yes, okay, 7% of Stoughton High students report that they smoke cigarettes sort of currently, which would mean when we surveyed them in the 30 days prior to the survey, they said they'd used a cigarette. The state rate was about 11%. So we're trending better than the state, and our cigarette rates have been decreasing. So when we started looking at them back in 2005, we were at 14%. So that number has significantly declined, which we like, and that's what we want to see. But what's troubling, I think, is what, we're talking about cigarettes in that particular case, and that kids are starting to use a lot of other products, which Larissa is an expert in. Some of these new trending products that are actually really being aimed at kids, flavored tobacco products and chew products and electronic cigarettes. And so we measure some of those things at Stoughton High, and we're seeing some of those rates increase while we see the cigarette rate go down. And what we don't measure, actually, and what we don't know a lot about are the e-cigarettes. So the next time we survey, that's a question we actually have to get into our instrument. But I can tell you, I know nationally, the e-cigarette rates are starting to exceed, and are exceeding, actually, cigarette rates among young people, which is not a good trend, not what we want to see. But so as a coalition, we support the tobacco efforts. It isn't something we have been sort of focusing on as a primary drug, but that doesn't mean that wouldn't change in the future. A lot of our work, we look at our data and we say, okay, unfortunately, we can't do everything, and we have to prioritize a little bit, which is why, in the coalition model, we bring in partners who kind of help us broaden our focus, which is why it's really great for us to have Larissa, because she's one of the ways that we help keep an eye on the tobacco work. And when the Board of Health is looking at tobacco regulations, I always call Larissa and say, hey, can you help me with what are some of the best practices in the state? How do we support our Board of Health to do some of these things that are important for our youth? Because we know that you're right, it does have an impact on their use of other drugs as well. And and certainly the whole idea about things that are kind of a gateway or a drug of initiation, I guess. So a lot of kids who smoke won't progress to other drugs, but some of them will. It certainly affects their brain chemistry. It puts them at higher risk for things. So in that way, you could call it a gateway drug, but I think sometimes people get upset about that because they say, well, you can smoke cigarettes and you don't go on to use cocaine. And we say that's true. But a lot of people who progress to harder drugs actually did start with cigarettes or with alcohol. Those numbers are just simply bigger than the numbers of people who use other things.
So if we could, Larissa, let's put your feet right on the hot coals.
Okay.
What are the best practices that are working? And as a secondary question, I want to speak to you about the 80 or so towns that have already adopted a regulation that Stoughton has on its plate to do some more work with. But please, so what are the best practices? What are the things that, and I think the goal is, how do we make smoking not cool? I mean, every generation, right? If it's tight jeans, short skirts, baggy jeans, long hair, something to be cool about. We need, I think the generation is going to identify its own cool. How do we make cigarettes not cool? What are the best practices?
Well, one of the biggest practices that we should first concentrate on especially is what the tobacco industry is doing. The tobacco industry is making a lot of these other tobacco products, like Stephanie was talking about, they're making them seem really cool. And actually, they use 3 really big tactics in order to actually hook kids onto their products. The 3 tactics are actually sweet, cheap, and easy to get. So the first tactic being sweet is they use a lot of flavored tobacco.
Can you actually show us a product right now?
Absolutely, I can.
And we'll pull Leo McGowan, who's our cameraman, to take some close-up shots of what we've got.
Yes, absolutely. So some of these products that you see here, they're the cigarillos, the cigars. They actually smell just like grapes. They do smell like, they come in flavors like blueberry and bubble gum, and they also come in flavors such as chocolate. And this is just basically, the FDA says that the tobacco industry uses flavors in order to lure kids because they are appealed to different flavors. I mean, you have items such as lollipops and candy that kids are appealed to.
So
but then
we're going to try to get a shot held right between
No, you want to? Yeah.
Stephanie and Larissa. Okay.
You see it?
So those are candies, and
you can see there's little pieces, there's actually tobacco products sprinkled or littered into the
so it's sort of in that same family of advertising then.
Exactly. Right. So they're appealing to the kids, they're appealing to teens and youth, first of all, by having those flavored products. And the FDA says that these flavored products appeal to kids. So, I mean, it's really great that you beforehand had these candy cigarettes or that you had something that was bubblegum flavored, and these are all coming out as tobacco products too. And so the big thing too is that, I mean, it appeals to kids, it won't necessarily appeal to adults. I mean, you can think of flavored cigarettes, but flavored cigarettes are actually illegal at this point. And if anything too, the flavor part is to mask the flavor of the tobacco,
So flavored cigarettes are illegal.
Yes. But these are not.
E-flavored cigarettes are not yet illegal.
Well, this is not a cigarette.
This is actually this is an e-cigarette right here. That right there is a cigar. And it actually smells like white grape if you wanted to smell that.
And so when you're smoking this, you're going to
get the taste
get
of
an
white
aroma,
grape. Right.
and that's going to help you to become addicted.
Right, and especially when it becomes addicted, the nicotine is a big factor. And that's the biggest issue as far as teens and young people using tobacco at such a young age, is tobacco not just changes the pathways of the brain, but nicotine, the nicotine part, also interferes with normal development of the brain, which, like Stephanie was talking about earlier, it could lead to drug and alcohol addiction later on in life. It could also lead to depression and also anxiety attacks. So the nicotine part is the tobacco, and the nicotine is what alters the chemistry of the teen and adolescent brain. So that's the biggest problem, and that's what the tobacco industry is hoping is going to happen, is they're hoping to hook these kids young. So once they do, they actually smoke much longer and they become addicted to nicotine much quicker than a normal adult if an adult was to start smoking.
Well, and I pulled some statistics to share with you guys from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and they said that if raising the minimum legal age to buy to 21 would lead to a 12% decrease in smoking prevalence. And the importance of that, they said, is that you would have 223,000 fewer premature deaths between the ages of the 2000 and 2019 group,
Right.
that young people group now. In addition, they would have 50,000 fewer deaths from lung cancer, and 4.2 million fewer years of life lost from average life expectancy.
And I believe a piece of that, the 223,000 less preventable deaths each year, that's also from the Institute of Medicine released a report back in March 2015, so just about a year ago, saying what the benefits would be if the minimum legal sales age was raised. So I mean, we do have about 80 cities and towns, correct, within the Commonwealth that have increased the age, and Stoughton has done a lot of great things as well. I mean, they have the pharmacy ban for tobacco, they did ban blunt wraps, they also did ban, I believe you guys also have, you banned something else, I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
So that was a policy initiative, say at the selectman level, is that how we did that?
Board of Health.
Board of Health did
The
that.
Board of Health
Yep.
created a policy. So let's speak more to the policies. Larissa has brought you some best practices.
Yes. Yep.
And what did you do enacting them? Tell us a little bit about it.
So the pharmacy ban, which came about, I think that went into place about a year ago. We worked with the Board of Health on that. Actually, initially, we were really trying to train some young people to do the advocacy work to try to get that passed, because we'd seen it pass in some other towns. We knew it would be an easy win, we thought, for Stoughton, and we thought it would be a great opportunity for some of our young people, particularly in the SAD chapter, who wanted to get involved with tobacco work. And unfortunately, because of the school year, and then the Board of Health didn't have quorum a couple times, this was probably 2 years ago, we weren't able to pull that off with the students. And so ultimately, the board just said, you know what, this is important, we need to pass this. And so they did. And so we have 5 pharmacies in Stoughton, and at the time I think we still had 6, the independent, which is no longer here. And you know, these are, all of the pharmacies now are corporations, things like CVS and Rite Aid, and basically what those corporations had been saying is they, while they sell tobacco products, if a local community changed their local rules, laws, that they would just go along with it. They weren't going to fight it at the corporate level, and so that was sort of an easy pass. And the rationale behind that is healthcare institutions like pharmacies who sell health products should not be selling tobacco products. It also is supposed to cover places like hospitals, but they don't sell cigarettes anyway, so that wasn't really an issue. So we passed that. There was no issue with that. Currently, the Board of Health is looking at banning smoking in municipal spaces, not indoor spaces, but outdoor spaces.
Yes.
So things like parks and playgrounds and parking lots and other municipally owned areas. And actually what's exciting for me actually about that particular policy is one of the ways that really came about is through some parent advocacy. Some parents, because there had been all this great work done on the new playground over at the CAP. So that renovation project that happened last winter that was completed to renovate Halloran Park and the CAP playground, when that space was sort of brand new and beautiful, and Oasis was involved with that project as well, because the old park really was conducive, unfortunately, to risky teen behaviors because of the way the structures were constructed. Parents were starting to notice that people were smoking there, and then they realized, well, actually they're allowed to, because in Stoughton we don't have that playground ban, and so they felt like there wasn't a whole lot they could do. And I had a parent actually reach out to me and say, well, what can we do? And I said, well, you should have a conversation with the Board of Health. This is great, and it's good that it's coming from parents, and they're really noticing it because they're saying, wow, this park is so clean and it's so wonderful, and we don't want our kids to be exposed to secondhand smoke.
And, yes.
So there is a public hearing actually scheduled for that policy. I want to say it's February 11th. It's coming up really soon. It would be on the Board of Health's website. It will be posted publicly in the paper and probably in the Penny Saver if people are interested in that. And so we're hoping that that will pass, and that will be another great thing for our community as well to to really reduce the risk of secondhand smoke, and also to send a message just to folks about smoking and in terms of things that we model for our young people. So so that is happening, and then the board is also starting to do some research around this Tobacco 21 piece of work. And there's a local physician, Dr. Lester Hartman, who has sort of put forth a petition. He's really trying to get communities to look at this. He's a doctor at Westwood Mansfield Pediatrics, so local regional pediatric practice, and this has been one of his passion pieces, and so he's been sharing the research with the board. I know they're going to have another discussion at their upcoming meeting. So it's something that they're considering. They have looked at the 21 issue in the past, and a couple of years ago I actually was at a meeting where they had a conversation about it, and the research actually wasn't there yet. So all of this, this new Institute of Medicine report, which is really terrific, I think really lays a good foundation for the research as to why this is a good public health policy. So so they're looking at it again as a possibility for Stoughton. I don't know what they'll do, but I can tell you the coalition is really in favor of the 21 policy because we really think that it's research grounded, and a lot of our work is really about making it harder for kids to access things like tobacco, for example, and this is a great way to do that.
And I don't mean to interrupt, and a really great other policy that could be going along with the 21 would also be a flavor restriction. So basically, I can't remember, Stephanie, how many adult-only tobacco establishments actually exist in the town of Stoughton?
I believe we have one.
Okay.
Yep.
So what a flavor restriction regulation would do is it would restrict all of these flavored tobacco products to one establishment within town. So that way it would be even, want to say, more difficult for teens and adult and youth to get their hands on these products. So that would be a really great policy to go along with that too.
Yep.
Can you speak a little bit to what I think is a rather thorny issue, and Larissa, maybe you first, enforcement, and I'll set a scenario for you. So I have a policy, we have a building in the downtown area. We have a policy, no smoking.
Right.
In the building, and people are generally very good about that. But it's cold out, so they go downstairs, right near the lobby door, just outside the door, and they smoke. And then everybody sort of passes by them.
Right.
And is going like, hey, can you make sure that they go somewhere else? So there's this idea of enforcement. We have good intentions, but enforcement is a thorny, tricky slope here. Who do you call, like, remember who do you call Ghostbusters?
Right.
So do you call smoke busters? I mean, who is the official smoke buster? I was personally not offended, but I was like taken aback. Someone's calling me up and holding me responsible for the people smoking outside the doors.
Exactly.
I own the building. I'm not the smoke buster police.
Right.
So what do we do about that?
The big thing about enforcement, especially when selling tobacco to underage children, to underage teens, I mean, the biggest thing is to try to enforce it is to have compliance checks done throughout the town. There are compliance checks that are conducted usually about how many times per year in Stoughton? About 3 times per year in Stoughton?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
But usually you do have one person who is designated to go from town to town, from store to store within a specific town, such as Whitman's done compliance checks before. I know, Stephanie, you said they've done compliance checks as far as alcohol is related as well.
We do the compliance checks. I just don't
right.
know how.
No, right, absolutely, totally. But the compliance checks that would happen would be, you would have somebody actually go in and pose as somebody who's underage and attempt to purchase tobacco products. And then what would happen is if they were to sell a retail establishment, were to sell to the underage individual, then that's when a lot of these fines would be imposed on these retail establishments. And that's when you would have to take a hard look, is it really being enforced in this town? And as far as even to speak to smoking in parks, you have the mantra of see something, say something. So if somebody were to see somebody smoking in a park, if that is passed, where you can no longer smoke on municipal property in town parks in Stoughton, you would hope that you would also have adults, if they see somebody lighting up a cigarette or one of these tobacco products, to basically say, oh my goodness, there's no smoking allowed on the properties anymore. So enforcement is a tricky slope, but there are ways to hopefully keep it in check when it comes to tobacco.
Yeah, especially I would think the police,
And
with all
yes.
the
Oh, right.
crime that they have, that they're trying to deal with, and even good, not necessarily crime, but other initiatives that they have, they get the 911. There's someone smoking in the park, and they're like,
Right.
okay, we'll try to get a car down there.
Right.
You know, so there's a little bit of a difficulty with that.
And I mean, even smoking in parks, you're not only thinking about secondhand smoke, but I mean, with smoking and combustible tobacco, you're also thinking about an issue. I mean, you're risking fire as well. So that's also something that they have to think about. That's another safety issue that they have to consider.
One of the pieces that I had heard about the enforcement piece too, though, is that simply by putting up signs, you get about 99% of the
Right.
way there with the enforcement. So when there's a sign in a public park that says no smoking, that most people will see the sign and say, oh, okay, that's the rule here, and I'm going to abide by that. There is always going to be that small percentage, you know, or I think in your situation, you're talking about a doorway in a building where people don't want to be out in the cold. I mean, who would want to be out this week? It was freezing, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the signage will get you a long way. It does give people an opportunity to sort of have a voice and say, hey, maybe you didn't see the sign,
Right.
you know, and to sort of politely let folks know. But I think it is hard for folks. I think certainly we're not suggesting that folks call 911 for people
No.
smoking. I don't think the police would appreciate that. But you know, the flip side of that, though, is that it does give the community sort of an additional enforcement tool to use in other situations where, you know, one of my concerns is people smoking things that are not just tobacco products. And so, you know, one of our issues used to be that there were young people visibly smoking marijuana products at the park, and it was sort of far enough off the street that it was difficult for, you know, by the time when the police would arrive, the kids would see them and they would be able to sort of scatter, but nobody was really worried about the behavior because from far away, you didn't really know what they were smoking. And now it's sort of like, you're not supposed to do that at all. It doesn't really matter what you're smoking. You're really not supposed to be doing that there. So, you know, it's sort of, in some ways it helps as an enforcement tool, but it's certainly not an emergency kind of situation. So we would hope that folks would kind of gently and nicely help enforce the policy and also sort of self-police around, you know, where it's allowed and where it's not.
Let me throw this up to either one of you. Someone with a sort of independent libertarian view. Say, look, where does it stop? Was it going to be 22 next year?
Right.
Is it 30? I mean, when do you stop telling me how to run my life? So what's the argument in this case?
I mean, I think the argument as far as raising the age is basically just the biggest one is to try to prevent a lot of these adolescents from getting addicted to tobacco and addicted to nicotine, which again can later lead to other problems in life. And also it could increase preventable deaths in the country. And when you have preventable deaths increase in the country, then you deal with the problem of healthcare costs rising. Then you deal with the problem of, unfortunately, people are dying from cancer and other ailments that are related to smoking. So I think the biggest thing is to try to just start to stop it where it can have the biggest effect and have the worst long-term effect later on. So
you wouldn't talk directly to like a further infringement of someone's rights, let's say?
I don't view it as an infringement of rights. I believe that it is protecting the youth, and it is protecting them from a lifelong of addiction, and it's protecting them from later on any ramifications, especially health ramifications that can happen later on in life. I mean, to relate it to a personal note, my mother smoked when she was younger, and by the time she had turned 40, she had developed full-blown asthma that was related to possibly the smoking that she did earlier in life. So she has to deal with that every single day, and every time she gets sick, she has to be especially careful because her lungs are very sensitive, and she can have a full-blown asthma attack and be out of work for her. You miss wages, you lose money due to doctor's appointments, you lose money to have to pay for prescriptions after the fact. I mean, not just if you're a smoker in general or currently, but later on if you develop any conditions related to smoking, it just affects everything.
She must be very proud of you.
She is. She's also a very patient woman, so she's had to deal with a lot of the school and a lot of a lot of the education and many nights where she's very proud.
Would you say that it's sort of instrumental in the way you think about smoking and smoke-related illness, so that you feel very deeply about this?
As far as, I mean, my mother having asthma, I believe my grandmother also had related to smoking. She did die of cancer back in 2002. So I believe it's all connected, and there's just implications definitely later down in life if you decide to light up, unfortunately.
So what if you're an executive at RJR Nabisco or something like this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One of these, RJR Reynolds, I'm sorry, not Nabisco. And you've got this vast empire and machinery that is all about bringing the pleasure of smoke to a mature audience. What are you saying to those guys? Like are you screaming out, "You got it all wrong. You're evil"?
I actually think there's probably a part of that, and the reason that I would say that is because there are documents from some of these big tobacco corporations over the years where they've actually indicated that their target audience really are young people.
Right.
So the very folks that, people who are under 18, because most people start smoking before they're 21. If you make it to 21 and you're not a smoker, only 10% of people beyond that point, or 10% of smokers rather, take up the habit after they're 21. So if you're in the industry, your best customer is the one you want to hook early, because it's like with alcohol too, brand loyalty. Whatever cigarettes you start smoking, for a lot of people, those are the ones they tend to stay with. So the industry does know that. And so despite what they might say publicly, a lot of their internal publications have been over the years, and when some of these things were exposed, around marketing to younger smokers. And I really do feel like when we look at some of these flavored products, a bubblegum flavored, mini cigarette is not marketed to a grown-up. I really, you have to say
clear.
They're not. Or this rainbow,
yes, it's very
e-cigarette
colorful.
is really not for me. It's for my 12-year-old or something.
And Leo, can you zero in on this? What appears to be in my hand? I don't know if you can get us down that close.
Yeah.
Snooze, a robust cigarette.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they really, they have really an enhanced packaging.
Exactly.
As well. That easy compact to hold.
And I mean, that can easily refer to not just combustible tobacco, but it can easily refer to dissolvable tobacco.
Which is what this is, right?
Basically, what snus is
Yeah, a
it's
little pack of,
you pack it right in between
like a
your
tea
gum
bag,
and your jaw.
right?
Correct.
So this is like
you
a
got
tea
it.
bag, and
that you would suck on.
And it dissolves.
And then that gives you all kinds of
nicotine
cancer of
yep,
the throat, right?
Oral cancer.
Yeah.
Right.
But they certainly, although they do have the warning very clearly, smokeless tobacco is addictive, I wonder sometimes if that isn't the appeal.
Right.
And I mean, and again, like Stephanie was saying before, that the chance of somebody smoking after the age of 21 does drop, would you say about by 10%?
Only 10% of smokers
Only 10%,
start after
excuse me,
21.
only 10% of smokers smoke after 21. I mean, it can also tie back to the tobacco industry's tactics. I mean, we talked about sweet, but we can also talk about cheap and easy to get. So basically, you have some of these products that run for as little as 79 cents. I mean, when was the last time you could have purchased anything for 79 cents?
Right.
Some of these tobacco products are as cheap, if not cheaper, than a song on iTunes. And a song on iTunes is about $1.29. And also, as far as easy to get, I mean, Stoughton's awesome with having their pharmacy ban in place. But again, going back up to seeing a lot of these products in convenience stores and gas stations, some in supermarkets. These kids are actually going to see all these products. They're colorful. They have those sweet named flavors. Basically, they're going to think that tobacco is a normal thing. And their impulse control portion of their brain is not entirely developed yet. So that leads to that impulse buy. It's nice and cheap, and it's also brightly colored, and it's also going to be easy to get because it's right around in my convenience store, right around the corner. So you can really speak to that. And also, again, going back to the Institute of Medicine report from March 2015, is they say to raise the age, the minimum legal sales age, also has to do kind of what social circles you're in. So if the age is about 18, you're associating with other people who are possibly under 18 who might want to ask for access to these tobacco products. Again, with the same with 19 and 20. But by the time you're 21, you're hopefully in a different social circle. You're now in college, and you now just have realized that using tobacco products is is not the best decision health-wise. So that's another part of the reasoning why it's a really great idea. Or it's a really good idea to go to raise that age for minimum legal sales.
So as you look to Stoughton and to make changes in Stoughton, what are your next steps that you're going to do in Stoughton?
In terms of the 21 issue, or?
Well, any sort of smoke-related. So if we're talking a tobacco-related issue, I mentioned it earlier. How do we make this less of a cool distraction, which is what all of these sort of cool things that people do, right? It's a distraction. And if you put something in your mouth, whether it's a cigarette or whether it's an e-cigarette or whether it's a chewable tablet or a lozenge or like a tea bag, whatever it is, you're getting a little distraction, right? Which is, I don't know if that's part of the allure, but then there's this whole cool piece, like where you mentioned the group that you hang around with.
Right.
So how, what are you doing, sort of the steps that you could do? We mentioned a little bit from the Board of Health piece, but what other pieces are you putting together?
So I feel like sort of similar to any other substance abuse issue that we would approach, we sort of look at this as a multi-pronged issue. So you're right, we have some of this policy work that we are in favor of, and that we try to provide the Board of Health with best practices. I'm always happy to do any research behind the scenes for them, come to public hearings, all of those pieces, because anytime you can put a policy in place, that always helps. So one of the best practices really is, as Larissa was saying, let's make it harder for kids to get their hands on these products, because developmentally, when you're an adolescent, the frontal lobe of your brain is still developing. Kids make choices like this, and sometimes you say to a teen, "Why did you do that?" And they say, "I don't know," and they really don't know. They actually really don't know. So
I still don't know.
Right, and sometimes we don't know either. But so part of our job is to sort of, in some ways, slow that down for them. So if we make it a little bit harder, maybe that extra few minutes or however much longer, they're less likely to do it, or they're going to do something that's just easier. Another big piece to this is parents, and so messages that parents send to their kids. So being really clear with your kids, starting pretty young, about how you feel about them using not just tobacco products, but other drugs and alcohol as well. So it's the same conversation that we encourage parents to have with their kids. Be clear about your expectations. Let them know, don't assume that they think that you think drugs are bad. You need to actually tell them what you think. And then you need to monitor them. And so you need to know where they are. You need to have rules in your house. You need to not be afraid to go into your kid's bedroom and look through their stuff. We tell parents, you're not really their friend, you're their parent. So that's okay. They live in your house, which means you own their bedroom and you own their cell phone, probably, if you pay the bill, and knowing what they're doing on social media, what they're looking at, finding opportunities to talk to them. So when things like this are in the news, or you see it in the store, even when they're little, you can have conversations with kids, developmentally appropriate, about what some of these products are. So with little kids, we would talk about these things basically as poison, because that's sort of the simplest thing. This is bad. Do not put this in your mouth. That's
like touching the stove.
Yeah, that's what I say to my 4-year-old. She's, what is that? That's poison. We don't, and it's going to make you really sick. And to her, that means, it's going to make you throw up. So my uncle smokes, and so she thinks, if Uncle Eddie smokes, he's going to puke. And to her, that's terrible. And so that's, that fits.
I could see her coming to you later. He's going to puke tonight.
He's going to puke, yeah. Yep. And we say probably.
Probably.
You keep nagging him. Go ahead.
By the way, I love what you're doing with the idea of encouraging family, young parents, by the way. I live with young parents, right, by the way. And they're struggling to create their own identity.
Right.
And as a parent, I'm talking about. So as you bring up children, right, you're not your childish yourself. I would hardly describe my relatives that way. They're very bright and very wonderful.
Yep.
But they are like piecing together who they are as an adult. And I think this strong piece that you're advocating about, you're not their friend.
Right.
And to demand, like, for instance, when you're paying the bills.
Right.
And one of the things I used to say to my kids, look, you want to change things? You pay all your bills, go out there in the world, go ahead.
Yep.
But while you're under my roof, it's my way.
Right.
And so that takes it to a level, I think, of where you say, look, it's my job. And in business, we use the phrase, don't expect what you don't inspect. And I think you just sort of showed me that on a parental level. Where don't expect what you don't inspect. If it means you have to go into their bedroom, tough tussies. You know,
Right.
that's what we say. You know,
Right.
you got to go.
Yep.
All right, and you have to put up with it. And if you don't like it, I think you need a new home. You know, maybe someone else is willing to give you 3 squares a day and a beautiful home and your phone and all the other wonderful benefits and all of the rides to soccer
Yep.
and basketball and all the things that go along with a really good parent.
That's
so,
right.
And I think kids are good at backwards leveraging, as if they'd give all that up in a heartbeat.
Right.
You know,
Right.
when they, in fact, the deal they have is so good, it's unbelievable. You know,
Right.
you know, kids that have good parents, you just can't get that deal.
Right.
We could only go back there.
Yep. Right. Exactly.
So I love that you're really advocating a very strong, not enforcement, but certainly a checking model where you
Yep.
check things.
Yep, and that's a huge protective factor for kids to
And
have.
not just tobacco.
Right,
This
it's for
is-
anything, yeah. So you really should be having those conversations with your kids about any of these, you know, prescription drugs, alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, all of those things. And, you know, and it really is the same conversation in a lot of ways. You know, and then one of the other things that we really look at is we look really carefully at our data at the high school. So a piece actually that's important to me, because I feel like I don't know a lot about in Stoughton what's happening, is this e-cigarette piece. So a big piece of our work going forward too is to learn more about that, what that looks like locally. So by making sure there are some good questions on our next survey, which we won't be doing again until 2017 because we do it every other year in the schools. When we're so grateful that they let us do that, because we know that is a bear to survey every single student, but the data is incredible. But also to do some focus group work and really to talk to kids about, you know, what do you think about these products, what's going on. But the piece that I do know about cigarettes in particular is that even though our cigarette rate is really low, what is troubling is that our kids still think that most of their peers smoke. So when you say to them, so what do you think? What percentage of Stoughton High students smoke cigarettes? They tell us it's 70%, which, you know, when you think about, so 7% say they smoke, but the perception is that 70% smoke, which generates almost this false peer pressure. It makes it seem like it's much bigger than it really is. It makes it seem like the majority of kids are doing this. They still seem to know that misperception is actually less than their beliefs about marijuana use and alcohol use. So they think that almost 90% of kids drink alcohol and almost 90% smoke pot, but only 70% use cigarettes. So they know less kids do that behavior, but they still think that it's very pervasive. And so that's a challenge for us as well. And so that's also some information we need to get out to kids. It's not the normative behavior. It really isn't that cool. People don't do it. And kids do have stronger feelings about at least cigarettes. I think some of these other products are newer, and they seem like fresher than cigarettes. A lot of kids sort of will say like, oh, smoking, like that's gross. But e-cigarettes, that seems somehow it's clean, it's not, it's vaping. They don't see it in the same category. And so I think that's our challenge, is as these products keep changing, you're right. I mean, it creates this cool factor that I think really doesn't so much exist with cigarettes anymore.
So it almost makes me think that the manufacturers have done the question I'm sort of asking you is, let's find something really cool to supplant or replace the existing cool.
That's right.
And so your job, I think, our job as a society, is to make something even more cool that doesn't include this.
Yeah.
Right.
Like what can we do that's even cooler than e-cigarettes? Because they've sort of played a good strategic game here.
Right.
Now they're getting these deliciously scented and flavored changes in the addictive quality of tobacco.
Right.
One thing I think that actually is helping us in this front is it seems to me that a lot of young people are much more conscious now about the kinds of things they put in their body in general. So, you know, a lot of kids I think are much more savvy about sort of being healthier, eating more healthy foods, thinking about foods that are local, that are not processed, thinking about exercise and taking care of their bodies. And so in that same vein, I think they look at a lot of these products and they go, well, that doesn't fit this, you know, if this is who I am and I am somebody who really takes care of myself physically, then I don't put these kinds of products into my body. Exactly. I think the challenge is when, and I think we see this with marijuana, is when people perceive that these things are natural, you know, or that, you know, with e-cigarettes, that they're somehow way less harmful. It's just vapor. It's not, you know, it's not cigarettes. It doesn't have as many of these additives and things that are as bad for you as a cigarette has. And so I think it's in some ways some of these things play into that paradigm, that it fits this sort of healthier image, and so I can still dabble with these things, but I'm not ingesting things that are poisonous. Now we know that that's not the case about any of these things, but I think there's a pretty good sort of smokescreen with some of the stuff for
no pun intended.
Right, no pun intended. That fits that new market in some ways.
So Larissa, Stephanie sort of identified, and I like the word identity.
Right.
Like that if you could aim or target your strategy towards somehow enhancing an identity that is not about smoke, that's part of a successful campaign.
Oh, it is, definitely. I mean, the more you try to tell these kids to identify with getting out and getting active rather than taking a look at these products that, I mean, yes, they're colorful and they are alluring, but also try to give them if they're very young, it probably wouldn't necessarily be helpful, but especially a lot of the teens, like e-cigarettes, the jury is still out on e-cigarettes at this point. I mean, the FDA does not approve it as a quit smoking method. So some people say, oh, I use e-cigarettes so I can quit smoking. The problem is it's not really approved to be a tool to quit smoking. And actually some people unfortunately end up doubling up on them. So they use the e-cigarettes and they end up using regular cigarettes. And the unfortunate thing is also
terrible.
Right,
exactly.
yeah, right.
And the unfortunate thing too is they're also not regulated by the FDA. So what happens is the tobacco companies and the tobacco industry can basically put it on the market saying it contains just water vapor or 0% nicotine, where in fact it can contain 25% nicotine or 50% nicotine. So that's a problem. So I think especially with teens, we need to educate them that yes, you can have a healthy lifestyle, and while you might think that things such as e-cigarettes or these novel things such as e-cigarettes are also part of this healthy lifestyle, they're really not. It's because there's so much still that we do not know about them. And from what we've gathered over some research that has been done, especially from Harvard School of Public Health, other institutions, that over time they do contain chemicals in them that can cause respiratory issues. So,
perhaps one of you can talk to me a little bit about this trend about hookah shops. How is it that society, on the one hand, is going to e-cigarettes and away from nicotine, and yet we have these new, it's almost a phenomenon in Boston and Cambridge,
right,
where hookah shops are becoming, and for the audience who doesn't know what a hookah shop is, it may not be what your worst thought was, but what in fact it is a like a smoke vase or something that people can smoke out of and get a deeper smoke sensation, and it's almost like going to a nightclub or any sort of a club that everybody does it, so that you'd sit around on a couch area and have a particular flavor of tobacco, and it really celebrates, these hookah shops celebrate smoking. So with that as a sort of a backdrop, society seems to be going in two different directions here.
I mean, with hookah,
Stephanie's like, I don't want this.
I'm going to give that to Larissa.
she's like, that's
Stephanie just looked at you and like, oh no, I'm not even going.
I mean, with hookah, you don't see it in Boston and Cambridge, but where I come from Rhode Island, and so you actually see a lot of these hookah shops, or actually hookah restaurants, actually crop up. And a lot of the places I've actually seen them crop up is over up on Thayer Street, which is where the location, a lot of universities, especially Brown universities over there. So they are probably to an extent targeting the younger college age group. But with hookah, I believe too, I'm not super versed on it, what happens is it does contain nicotine, and it does also contain lots of other chemicals that are harmful to the individuals who do smoke it.
So it doesn't really explain it, though.
It doesn't explain it.
That's the thing.
I don't know.
It doesn't.
Stephanie was wise to avoid that question.
I know. I wish I knew the answer.
And you probably also run into a problem too, as far as hookah shops or hookah restaurants opening up in all these different cities and towns. You also run into issues where there's problems with zoning, where there's problems with, I believe in East Bridgewater, they actually had, and I believe it's no longer in existence, they actually had a hookah shop that opened up next to a child's karate studio. So then you run into those issues like, where is it being placed? What are the zoning issues? What are the laws that a lot of these people have to go through as far as opening something like a hookah shop or a hookah restaurant? So a lot of that is just such a balancing act that, again, the verdict is still out on that kind of idea too, when those are also conflicting.
So it's important, I think, that efforts such as your own and Stephanie's in educating select persons and in the public that perhaps some preemptive work in matters of ordinances and policy would be very helpful to keep like a better, not perspective, maybe a better control over sort of societal influences that are going in the opposite direction.
Right.
Right. And for me, that's why I really love the coalition model, because I feel like in Stoughton, we're lucky. We have an amazing, diverse kind of cross-sector coalition. And so I do actually work really closely with Noreen O'Toole, who's our town planner. So, you know, when things like this come up, you know, I can call Noreen and say, hey, have we ever thought about this before? And, you know, is it something we should think about? So, you know, a couple of years ago, when the medical marijuana law was passed, you know, folks in town were saying, well, we don't want to have a medical marijuana dispensary here. And so we said, okay, well, then we need to think ahead of time about what we need to put in place, because you're right, if we plan ahead and we aren't appropriately zoned, then we open ourselves up to basically let anything happen. So, you know, to sort of think that through and say, okay, what are we legally allowed to do in this town? In the case of the medical marijuana dispensaries, the law was such that we couldn't, as a community, you couldn't actually say we're not allowed to have one, but you could control where it was. And so you could really think about, okay, if one were to come here, you know, how do we put it in a place that, you know, kids aren't going to be walking by? How do we manage advertising and signage so that it's very kind of low profile and doesn't call attention to itself? And, you know, security issues, all of that stuff, we can think about that in advance. And in some ways, we can make ourselves seem a whole lot less friendly to a dispensary than other communities, which is what happened. Yeah. So it's great. So, you know, so as a community, you know, when these kinds of things come up, we can think about, okay, who in our coalition maybe already has knowledge about that? How do we put the people in the right room? So, like, maybe how do I get Larissa together with Noreen to say, is this something we should be thinking about ahead of time? And, you know, or what do we know, or what, maybe we have something in place and we're not aware of that, or, you know, what are the regulations around those particular issues?
So as we continue the conversation, I'm going to ask Roy to put up our community credits for a bit. And when I come back with our two specialists here, I'm going to ask them, where do they get their money? Because that's important. If they're going to be successful, we have to fund these efforts. So Roy Cohen is our producer out back. Jeff Pickett also is co-producing today, doing a great job. Leo McGowan's behind the camera. And we're going to have them roll the credits. So,
hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662. Or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilsa Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver, our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Community Forum showtimes in Easton. Mondays at 9 p.m., Tuesday at 8 a.m., Wednesdays 3 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. And that too, Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 22. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
And we'd also like to remind you that Monday night bingo at the Harvest Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. It's a wonderful time. The doors open at 4:30. They have great prizes. The games start at 6:30. Not only will you have fun, but you'll be with a great group of people supporting one of the nicest congregations, the Harvest Torah, that we have in the entire community. We've also got a wonderful Stoughton Media Access Corporation's all-school 5th grade spelling bee. I love this. For those of you smarty pants 5th graders, we need to get you down here on Monday, February 22nd at the Stoughton Town Hall. All right? So you're going to get into a contest and see which of you can spell all of the really tricky words that we're going to put together. All right? And that's for 5th graders. You can watch that show live on Comcast 9, Verizon 28. And I want to add, almost everyone who wins a spelling bee like this goes on to become a tremendous success in life. And even if you lose, you're going to go on and become a tremendous success in life. So you need to go. And by the way, there's a snow date, February 29th at 7 p.m. And Hometown Business. So Stoughton Media Access Corporation has put together this wonderful show, Hometown Business, where we try to create the prosperity that hometown businesses need. And our current show right now that's running is Copy Inks. And I said create the prosperity. What I really should have said is help aid the prosperity. Help people to run their businesses well so that businesses can add into the community and the fabric of Stoughton. And on Tuesdays at 11 a.m., Wednesdays at 5:30, Thursdays at 8, and Sundays at 7. So you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and a Sunday night show in which you can see and get to know how do people run their businesses. What is it like for them? What are the tricks of their trade? So if you're thinking of running a typical business, one of the upcoming shows is Stone Lovin' down in Cobb's Corner. And they talk about how, the fellow that owns that talks about how he came up with the ideas. In a way, he sort of poached ideas from Panera Bread. And he doesn't sort of say it that way, but he looked at their menu and he said, oh, wow, these are great menu items. I'm going to try to create a menu that way. And you get those kind of secrets on the Hometown Business Show. So Comcast Channel 9, Verizon 28. We also have a new show here at Stoughton Media Access Corporation. And this is a delightful show, and I'm delighted to be hosting today Stephanie Patton, who is the host for We Are United for a Healthy Stoughton. And that's a great show where she talks about all the wonderful things that Oasis does, all the great things that are happening in the community. And you can watch that show Mondays at 5, Tuesdays at 9 a.m., Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m., Fridays at 11 a.m. So you have 4 chances to catch the weekly show that Stephanie is putting on. And this is the kind of community. Stoughton Media Access is just doing incredible work. It's better TV than network TV. There's no question about that. So do start to pay attention if you can. Look for We Are United. It's a great show, Comcast 9, Verizon 28. So Oasis, in case you aren't familiar, is organizing against substances in Stoughton. There can't be a more important thing that we can do for the youth in Stoughton than to make sure that they don't get trapped in the cycles of drugs and addiction. 781-341-2252, extension 9456, Stephanie Patton, Master's in Public Health, that's what MPH is, and she is the Substance Abuse Prevention Coordinator, and she's trying in every way to try and help us all out. So the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership, and I had trouble with that at the beginning of the show. Larissa Swenson has also been our guest, and she has a Master's in Public Administration. She's the Program Coordinator. If you need to touch base with her, if you think there's a tobacco issue that's hot that you want to discuss, 857-939-4528. Larissa will be happy to speak to you. Just call her up and we'll work. So we're back in studio, and we have just a minute that I wanted to, we only have a few minutes. Yeah. So one thing I wanted, where's your funding? Because I think it's important. So Stephanie?
Yep, so we are, Oasis is in the last year of a federal grant. We've had 10 years of amazing funding through the Drug-Free Communities grant, and it is running out. It's dwindling this year, and so one of the things we are actually doing is we're working really hard to try to get the prevention coordinator position into the town budget through the Youth Commission. And so if you've seen us at the Board of Selectmen's meeting or FinCom, that's partly why we're there. So we're working hard on that. We do believe that this is a really important issue, and that we're having big success really reducing youth substance abuse rates in Stoughton, and that it's well worth. There's a pretty big payoff for doing this work, and we want to keep doing it.
Especially for the youth. And
yes.
Very quickly, Larissa?
Right, and my position is funded through the Massachusetts Department of Public Health up in Boston. So definitely it would be great if anybody ever wanted to go and to call DPH and talk to DPH, or even just talk to your local leaders and just talk about what a great program we are about tobacco prevention. So.
All right. You first, give me like one or two things that you want people to for sure come away with from this TV show.
To take away, I think I definitely want people to know to not be shy about to ask your kids, or to really ask anybody what's going on in the community, not just Stoughton, but your individual community, whether you're from Stoughton, whether you're from Whitman, whether you're from Waltham, and to just basically ask your kids, like, what do you see in these corner stores? Don't be afraid to ask, like, what are your friends doing? And another big thing to take away is that the tobacco industry is unfortunately out there to target kids, and these are some of the methods that they end up using. And to just be aware of, just to basically get enraged about what a lot of these advertisements and a lot of these tactics that they're using, and to just make your kids aware of what's going on.
Thank you. And Stephanie, you have 40-odd seconds.
Great. Yep. So I would say, for me, I always think alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, they fall in the same domain. Addiction really is a developmental pediatric disease. I've heard some physicians talk about it that way. So the roots of addiction and some of the challenges we're facing societally, even as we think about the opiate crisis, have their roots in adolescence and kids getting hooked early on things like tobacco, marijuana, and alcohol. So really important for us to pay attention and reduce those rates.
Thank you, Stephanie Patton. Yeah. Thank you, Larissa Swenson.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for watching the show. This is Stoughton Media Access Corporation's Community Forum. My name is Steve Kelly. I've been your host. And thank you for watching. And thank you to our volunteers, Leo McGowan, Roy Cohen, and Jeff Pickett out back, who's kind of volunteering too. Thank you.